Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Coffee, where in today's video, we're going to take a look at some of the evidence, now that we've got all three films of the sequel trilogy, to take a look at whether Snoke was always intended to be Palpatine. That's today here on Star Wars Coffee.
I have spoken.
Hello there to all of the returning subscribers, but if you're new to the channel and you're just finding Star Wars Coffee for the first time, be sure to always hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And don't forget to check out Star Wars Coffee on Twitter and Twitch, and don't forget to check out the official Star Wars Coffee merchandise. Links are in the description below.
Do it!
And now let's go to a galaxy far, far away.
This is the way.
I think it's incredibly obvious to just the general audience perspective that Palpatine was not always intended to be Snoke, in the same sense that Snoke was always intended to be Palpatine. It can go either way, and either way you look at it, I don't think that this was always the case. Now, had you decided to let J.J. Abrams make all three films, I still believe that we probably would have gotten Snoke as the big bad throughout the sequel trilogy, rather than having to bring in Palpatine, since Rian Johnson killed off Snoke in The Last Jedi. But, with that being the case, I know we tend to look at these things like from our point of view, if you will, and that insinuates the fact that we are able to see the post-production, we're able to see the thing outside of the world that it's in. And if you just take a look at the world that it's in, then it becomes much easier to take the idea that you can look at this character and see Palpatine manipulating the whole thing. And I think that this is what Disney and Lucasfilm has been doing, especially with the comics, and specifically they did this in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic. And they did this in one of the first two issues, where they're saying that Snoke was not always Snoke, and this is between Kylo Ren and Snoke, where he's talking about a name that he has to pick if he wants to destroy Ben Solo, etc. And I think that if you look at it from just the Star Wars canon, rather than taking a look at what we know, which is JJ did the first one, we got Ryan the second one, we're supposed to have a different director for the third one. So if you take all of the just general production aspects out of it, I think if we can take a look at some of these visual cues here and really see that Snoke is Palpatine. And because we have to tie it in with canon, then I think it becomes much more obvious. But obviously, to be very clear on this, I don't think that this was always intended to be the case. But with the fact that it is canon, we're going to take a look at the clues that we can now see in perspective, knowing that this is the ending, and try and piece it together to make it much more fitting. So, it begins, as I said, in the Rise of Kylo Ren, where Snoke reveals, and he says, I quote, "I was not born Snoke, but I became Snoke," which implies that this is not his original identity. This is when Ben Solo first goes to Snoke after leaving Luke's Jedi Temple. And then we see a Bacta tank full of Snoke clones in The Rise of Skywalker as Kylo is making his way to Palpatine. And we hear Palpatine say that line, "I created Snoke." So Palpatine created Snoke's body with Sith alchemy, which was already canon. It just wasn't really explored in the same sense that, you know, we have the Force explored and the World Between Worlds explored in that same type of sense. So this has already been two really good clues. Obviously one of them is from a different medium that wasn't in film, but it's still canon nonetheless. And it's a direct tie-in to the sequel trilogy with the Ben Solo rising, to become Kylo Ren. And then we have Snoke was able to possess the body, which is why it was decaying just like Palpatine's original body was, due to the draining effects of the dark side of the Force. And this is also why, Snoke looks so disfigured and everything. So that makes a lot of sense as well. And if we take a look even further at that, in The Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine tells Ben Solo, "I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head," with three different voices. "I have been every voice," which is the Palpatine part, "you have ever heard," which is the Snoke line, "inside your head," is the Vader line. This is proof that Palpatine can manipulate his voice as Snoke as well. So this just continues to give more credence to the fact that Palpatine was able to become Snoke in a sense, as Snoke says, he was not always Snoke, but he became Snoke. And why would Palpatine do this? He would do this simply because Palpatine was not ready for his clone body. And that is why, he has to be tied onto this claw machine before he uses the Force dyad of Rey and Ben Solo to kind of heal himself to a much healthier state than what he is in, which is, decayed, crippled, and all of that. So, Snoke only appeared so often, and when he did, he was a decaying corpse just like Palpatine was in The Rise of Skywalker. Clearly, Snoke is not the healthiest of people. Palpatine needed, a new look to lead the First Order, as otherwise Luke would have known that he had failed, in the sense that him and Vader had not actually defeated Palpatine. While they did bring balance to the Force, as Palpatine was too weak to continue his Empire reign, he did have to, redo his assets, prepare for everything once again. And so had he just came back as Palpatine, never actually going away, at the state he was in, Luke could have tracked him down, when he was much younger, and just put an end to Palpatine at that point, considering how weak Palpatine was in The Rise of Skywalker. He surely would have been destroyed by Luke had he not took on the persona of Snoke. So Palpatine spoke through Snoke, but in a different voice, while his body was on Exegol, trying to, sustain his life in a sense. Kind of like Luke's Force projection, except much less than that, because Snoke literally is a clone, whereas Luke was just projecting himself. But I think that's the closest similarity we can think of to what Palpatine was able to do with the character of Snoke. So I think, obviously, I've been saying Snoke was a pawn this whole time, and I think that became clear once Kylo killed him, that he wasn't going to be the true big bad. Obviously, the misdirect was that gave fans to believe that Kylo was, and that he wasn't going to turn back to Ben Solo. However, that's not the case, and with that being the fact, we know that Palpatine ended up being the real big bad of the trilogy, with a redeeming quality of Ben Solo, which I think most fans actually wanted to see. So I just wanted to put that into kind of a canon context for you guys, and obviously there's also these visuals. So, in The Force Awakens, we have a conversation between Kylo Ren and a hologram of Snoke, and this mirrors Empire with Palpatine and Vader. So the two there, beyond the fact that it's just visual cues, and we know that it's visual cues because it's Star Wars and it has to have that certain aesthetic, if we put it out of the production aspect and just put it into the canon context, that's more of a hint that that was always there as well. And then you take a look and you see Palpatine and Snoke both have their kind of throne and their throne room. When we saw Snoke's in The Last Jedi, obviously it was much more visually appealing, whereas Palpatine's was not. He had a look on space, and Snoke just had this really gold and red room. But that's still there, and we still have the Praetorian Guards and Palpatine's Royal Guards. So we have both of them in red, obviously. So the hint that Palpatine is still in the realm of Star Wars, in terms of just the canon aspect, is clearly still there as well. And beyond that, we also saw in The Last Jedi Palpatine esque qualities come out of Snoke when he used Force Lightning on Ben Solo to shock him, and we see Palpatine use Force Lightning all the time, as that's his main ability. And so I just wanted to point that out as well, that this really is, what it is. It is the idea that a character like Palpatine, who was the puppet master for the original 6 films, would continue to be the puppet master there. And in that aspect, I find this bringing back Palpatine, whether you believe it was a retcon of Rian Johnson or not, to be fitting end to the Skywalker saga. As if it wasn't, and Snoke was the big bad, what would stop somebody else from bringing peace to the galaxy, and trying to bring a new empire about? It really just goes to show that Palpatine is the only one who is actually able to do this, as he's the only one wise enough, clever enough, cunning enough, powerful enough with the Force to rival this balance and take power in the way that he was able to. So I think that the Skywalker saga definitely needs to be concluded here. I don't want another trilogy in 10 years for the next generation that continues the story. There should not be any more of it. There should be no more conflict. This should be the end of the timeline for Star Wars. It should be peace and peaceful stories, and you can have stories of smugglers and all that, as there will always be some type of conflict, but in terms of an overall arching empire, that needs to be done. Otherwise, the whole concept of the Force and the prophecy and balancing it was nothing, and it was all for nothing. And I just wanted to share those thoughts with you guys. If you enjoy this content, I really do encourage you guys. I just started a Patreon recently. I have 4 different tiers. I have a $1 tier is the lowest one, and I really appreciate it if you guys would go check that out for me. I have a link in the description below. There's 4 different tiers. I'm working on some new merchandise with that associated with these tiers, but please go check that out and consider supporting me if you do find my content enjoyable. You're going to get behind the scenes look at thumbnails and what I'm going to be posting on. I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to vote on what I can be covering more of, focusing on. You're going to get behind the scenes look at how I make my videos if you're a certain tier. Also, we're going to be doing Clone Wars reviews and Mandalorian review episodes there as a much more casual type of conversation where I'm just going to kind of give a voiceover type of deal without all of the, you know, in between and the logo and everything, because you guys are coming to see the content, so I don't have to fluff it with, you know, to new audiences as I would with the logo and the introduction, because you guys know what it's going to be. But again, please just go check that out if you guys really enjoy my content and get value from it. That would really mean a lot to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. May God bless you and the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed this episode, and frankly, even if you didn't, don't forget to subscribe.
Do it.
And if you want to help spread the word, please give this video a thumbs up and tell your friends to subscribe. Please check out the official Star Wars Coffee merchandise, and don't forget to check out all of the content playlists on this channel, including The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, and much more.